You have questions? And you're working on Kozort, right? And we're going to do the whole thing this Thursday. Yes.
On page 165 in Two Truths.
You should have asked these a few years ago. And Guy and I were knee deep in all of this. This took years.
It's the paragraph beginning right underneath the second quote. If it were an emptiness, a true cessation would have to be the final nature of the mind in which it exists. How can it suddenly become the final nature of the mind at a certain point in the mental continuum without having been the nature of previous minds in that continuum? Okay.
You know, the people who hold that a true cessation is not an emptiness, okay? Here you are, right? You're sitting in meditative equipoise on the path of preparation, near the end of the path of preparation. And the sense of duality between subject and object has gotten to the point where you cannot even ascertain it anymore. Right? And then there's some further change. And right within that session, while you're sitting in one point of meditative equipoise, the progress may be induced by analysis, I suppose, but I would think at that point you were just sitting in one pointed meditative equipoise. See, when people meditate, once they've achieved calm abiding, then they alternate analytical meditation and stabilizing meditation. Because why did you develop this very powerful mind of silence? So that you can put it to bear on a topic, so that you can analyze. But as you're analyzing, you begin to notice, oh, I'm starting to waver. So then you cease analyzing. And when you get to the point of not wavering anymore, then you can begin analyzing again. And analyzing and setting in one-pointed meditative equipoise at the beginning, means even at the time of having achieved calm abiding, are as if contradictory. The one disturbs the other. You sit in one-pointed meditative, one-pointed equipoise to the point where it's almost as if you couldn't analyze, you know? You got to make sure that doesn't happen. This is a mind that's very sharp and able to analyze, but then analysis takes it too far, so you bring it back and you set one-pointedly. Then what you want to do is to keep analyzing, so you don't want to set too long. So then you go back, analyze again, back and forth, and it finally gets to the point where the more you analyze, the more stability this induces. The more it induces, the more stability you have, the more you can analyze. Isn't that incredible? When I was working on my new PowerBook computer yesterday, and it's been giving me a lot of trouble. I have to think about this, think about that, think about this, think about that. And then, this morning I thought, my Lord, what does this do to your mind? It's like, there was no stability at all. So you see, this sort of analysis just had fractured my mind out. I was thinking, well, I've got to stop and do some mantra here that would be particularly helpful for setting the mind, but also, smoothing it, taking off the rough edges. And isn't that what the university life is like? You analyze too much and you get frazzled out on coffee and so forth, and even if you understand something really valuable, 2 minutes time later you don't even know what it was. You lose the ability to stay on it. Thus the ability of silence, of one-pointedness, is extremely important, because otherwise when you find something that's worth remembering, you won't even remember it. You won't even remember it. Surely you look for some other topic to go on to. Isn't it pathetic? So achieving some sort of balance between, and then on the other hand, if you decide, oh, it's much better to recite mantra all day long, then usually it gets to the point where you can't analyze at all, Somebody says, what's your name or whatever, and it's how do you do this or how do you do that? Now, of course, the mind of calm abiding is not like that, in that you've overcome the problems of looseness, laxity, lethargy, and so forth, right? But it is not immediately capable of tremendous analysis. Analysis tends to not frazzle it the way we get frazzled, but to frazzle it some. So you stop analyzing, switch back and forth, as I was saying, until the one induces more of the other. And when the one induces more of the other, in equal measure, then that's the point of attaining special insight, if the object is emptiness. All right? That's the beginning of the path of preparation. So now here, over the path of preparation, whatever sense of duality between the mind that's realizing emptiness and emptiness, like there have to be all sorts of subtle levels, right? So there are 4 levels. You finally get to the point where you yourself can't even ascertain it anymore, but it's still there. And then the path of seeing, directly realize emptiness. And that's the uninterrupted path of the path of seeing. Why is it called uninterrupted? Because it passes immediately to the path of release. Okay? Immediately. And in that initial moment of direct perception of emptiness, which then continues, you don't leave it, you overcome all of the acquired afflictive obstructions, right? What do we call them? Artificial afflictive obstructions or acquired afflictive obstructions. They're just gone. And you're just there, right? Directly realizing emptiness. So in that very second moment, you're in the path of release. So at that time, are you realizing something new? Are you realizing something other than emptiness? That's when the true cessation occurs, you see.
True cessation occurs at the entering into the path of seeing?
No, the second moment. At the path of release, you see. The uninterrupted path overcomes the artificial afflictive obstructions. Then the ceasedness of that can occur. The ceasedness, the destructiveness of that can occur. Now, does that mean that's like going, you realize emptiness, and then, oh, wow, I got rid of that, because you see the absence of those afflictive obstructions? Or are you just, it can't be that, right? You're just sitting in meditative equipoise on emptiness. And the only difference between the first moment and the second moment is it just the fact that you've overcome these? And do you pay attention? Do you think you now have a stirring of thought in which you think? You don't. It's direct perception. It's still meditative equipoise. So, in the second moment, when the true cessation occurs, is there some other thing? And what is this other thing that you realize? For people who say true cessation is not emptiness.
Which is kind of my question. If it's not an emptiness, what is it?
Yes, so what Jayant Shiva says, which I think is quite cute, is it's an emptiness of the mind in the continuum of somebody who has overcome, in this case, the artificial afflictive obstructions. So it's still emptiness, but the mind that it qualifies has changed. And the person who's realizing it just realizes emptiness. And you're realizing the emptiness of all phenomena in the universe. So it's not like you're you're saying, oh yeah, now it's a different emptiness or something like that. He's able to sort of fudge around it so that it ends up just being emptiness. And why I've gone through this presentation is to help to give you a sense of why you would want to call this just emptiness. So then what's nirvāṇa? Nirvāṇa is the emptiness of the mind in the continuum of somebody who has overcome all afflictive obstructions. So it's still emptiness of the mind, but it's in the continuum of somebody who's overcome all of the afflictive obstructions. Because nirvāṇa is the supreme true cessation.
I have a question on that, actually.
But now wait a minute, he's got his question.
Okay, that's right.
No, go ahead on that, because my question was, what is it other than emptiness? And then
Well, what it is this ceasedness of the afflictive obstructions. But I mean, it's like, well, what the hell would it be? So that's why I said it would be cute if you could define it in some way that it was just emptiness. You see, it would sort of help with whatever this problem was. I remember having a long debate with Lothar Rinpoche, your question. Well, because he's a follower of Paṇ-chen Bsod-nams-grags-pa, and Paṇ-chen Bsod-nams-grags-pa holds that true cessation is not just emptiness. So, like, what is it? You're in meditative equipoise, does something change? Or, there has been a change. But in terms of what you're perceiving, you can tell what my opinion on the topic is. But
On page 167, first quote,
first of all,
the real nature of mind, which is the base for both the abandonment of the seeds of afflictions and the vanishing of appearances of the aggregates of appropriation, is considered nirvāṇa. The non-production of the subsequent of similar type through breaking the continuum of causes and conditions for the afflictions and so forth is not considered nirvāṇa. So I was like, to me, this is definitely not clear.
well, the real nature means emptiness.
Mm-hmm. But that's considered nirvāṇa.
You see, this is just what I was talking about. In Prasanghika, the emptiness, real nature, of a mind, which is the basis for the abandonment, abandonment means the state of having abandoned, or the abandonedness of the seeds of the afflictions. That's called nirvāṇa. But the non-production of afflictions in the future is not what is being realized.
But aren't you
That's
saying
not
still
nirvāṇa. That's not, even though nirvāṇa will mean that you won't generate afflictions in the future, right? That very non-production of the afflictions in the future, because it's not an emptiness, it's just the non-production of afflictions, is not nirvāṇa.
so this abandonment of the seeds of the afflictions is this ceasedness that the other guy says is what the true cessation is. And here Tsongkhapa says that it's the emptiness which is the basis for that ceasedness.
It's the emptiness of the mind that is the basis.
Okay.
Oh, it's not the real nature that is the basis,
Right.
but this which clause modifies mind.
Right.
Jeffrey? You said that Paṇ-chen Bsod-nams-grags-pa did not assert true cessations as emptiness.
Right.
What did he assert true cessations to do?
They're the. I guess he said. What does he say here? What does this guy say? I always have a problem with his assertion. It's the absence of the afflictions. So then,
That's a lower school kind of, that's one of the things I'm supposed to read for Thursday, that Kozer talks about how lower schools call nirvāṇa the absence of affliction, or what did you say? Of affliction?
absence of the affliction.
Okay,
Huh. But I'm not. There's more to say on the topic than what I've said today, but that's it in a nutshell.
Just true cessations are emptiness.
Yes, that Paṇ-chen Bsod-nams-grags-pa says the true cessations are ultimate truths, but not emptinesses, right? Why are they ultimate truths? Because they are something that is realized by the ultimate consciousness. The ultimate consciousness is a consciousness of meditative equipoise. Now, we've always been thinking, oh, what it realizes is emptiness. But you see, in that second moment, it also realizes this absence of the afflictions. Therefore, it is that absence, this true cessation, is an object of the ultimate mind. Thus, it is an ultimate truth. But for Paṇ-chen Bsod-nams-grags-pa, it's not an emptiness. Why? Because its object of negation exists. The absence of the afflictions at a certain level, whatever the level is, the afflictions exist, right? Maybe yours won't on that level, but afflictions in general exist. Whereas with an emptiness, the object of negation has to be non-existent. So Jayasheva very cleverly, you see, I say it's cute even. Cute means, you know, he's twisting it a little bit. Says it's the emptiness of a mind, right? Of mind in the continuum of somebody who has abandoned a certain level of afflictions. So you can see how something could be, how somebody might want to say it's an ultimate truth but not an emptiness. But that's like, to me, that's ridiculous, you know. And don't think I'm being partisan. Just because Jayasheva asserts it the way I do. No, I think you can see from my reflections on reality, I don't always go with Jayasheva. There are a couple times. Yes? Next.
I have an issue that I was struggling with. I'm not sure I can frame a question. I have a few quotes about it. Basically, what it has to do with is the distinction that Jam-dbyangs-bzhad-pa makes between objects of comprehension and objects that are found.
Oh.
My understanding was that the first is that an object can appear and be comprehended as it would exist for someone else even, but that to be found would have to exist within your own perspective. That was part of the distinction.
I remember reading this just recently and thinking, oh yeah, we were into that a few years ago. Yeah, you can imagine reading along and you know, you think they're the same thing for a while and then you don't, you know, and then, you know, finally there's a line that makes it clear and then you're left 3 years later not knowing anything. Where's the passage?
Let's see. I was jumping around, but I think I can find that. Sorry about that.
Jayasheva's text is very confusing after a certain, up to a certain point, it's just beautiful. And you compare it to other texts, the other texts don't even have any taste. Remember when George Dreyfus read it, it got out, you know, he was doing Uma and he had done Uma from, I don't know if it was Paṇ-chen Bsod-nams-grags-pa or Jitsimba, maybe both of them. And there's just so much more. But then at a certain point, you just have to put it down. It gets so complex. And what you think he was saying, you find out he isn't saying. And but, you know, it's so great until a certain point. And it's different for each person. And then he suggested it to Gunjo Tsering, who's a follower of Paṇ-chen Bsod-nams-grags-pa. It's the same, oh, you know, wonderful. But then after a certain point, you got to put it down. Well, Guy and I couldn't put it down, you know? And every time I read it, it was like, oh my God, here it goes again, you know? It'd be so great. And I get farther each time. It turns out, as Guy lays out, and as you'll see when the translation comes out, Jayasheva uses two different interpretations of the same topic. And he doesn't tell you that he is. And neither of them is that good. Noam Beldin's interpretation I found to be better. But once you have that clue, then you can go on reading this very rich material, even if you don't agree with it. Yes? We have
Yes,
diverted him. Oh,
it's on
that's too bad.
104.
I mean, oh, that's good. No, I'm just joking. I'd love to get into this material again. Wow, it took us years. As mentioned above, Prasangikas assert that all mistaken consciousnesses are valid cognizers of their appearing objects. So even a consciousness that, a wrong consciousness, such as that holds that the horns of a rabbit exist, is a pramana with respect to its appearing object. What do you think that means? Horns of a rabbit don't exist, right? So what's the appearing object of, what's the nangyo of consciousness that's, of a mental consciousness? Ryon Ranzin Tokwe Nangyo Sha. Ryon Ranzin Tokwe Nangyo Shugi Meyo Chair. Tama. Ryon Ranzin Tokwe Nangyo Shugi Wata. Sha. Ryon Re Tunji, the generic image of Ryon Ra. Because that consciousness can remember the image, the nangyo, right? The generic image of the horns of a rabbit, then it has something, it can ascertain it, knows it. So it's tsema with respect to that. It's not tsema. Tsema ma'ingyan, tela tsema, nangyo tsema. Okay. If we were to take object found by conventional valid cognition, an object comprehended by a conventional valid cognition as equivalence, then inherent existence would be an object found by a conventional valid cognition, because it appears to all conventional minds. And all minds must comprehend what appears to them. In that case, object found by a conventional valid cognition would absurdly include inherent existence, and hence would be too broad to work as the definition of concealer truth. Therefore, if object of comprehension and object found, if you were dumb enough to think that object of comprehension and object found were equivalent, the qualifying clauses would be needed. So Jnana Shiva says that they aren't equivalent. He's splitting it here. Object found and object comprehended have to face facts, should be equivalent. But in order to squirm out, right, of the situation that you get forced into, then you make a difference between object found and object comprehended. Okay?
I was wondering about on the next page here, 106, if they have to do that again.
106?
Yeah, at the top there's a sutra quote. The Jatakas see conventionalities as the province of the world. That which is ultimate is inexpressible, is not an object of knowledge, is not an object of consciousness, is not an object of thorough knowledge, is indemonstrable.
And in fact, it's the meaning of the Father and Son Sutra that serves as the source, doesn't it? Isn't it? Father and Son Sutra? As the source for the statement that it's objects of knowledge that are divided into two truths. Therefore, what was your question?
How is it the object of knowledge that is the basis of the division of the two truths if he says right here that it's not an object of knowledge? The ultimate's not an object of knowledge.
Well, you just have to find some way to he's already sinking. To qualify this so that you can still say the two of them, right? The ultimate as it is perceived as it is exactly perceived in meditative equipoise is not an object of a dualistic consciousness. Didn't you see that there? It's not an object of a dualistic consciousness. Something like that, right?
Right. They use the
You get into the swing of it after
to
a
get out
while,
of, yeah.
right?
Okay.
But now you see, I think this kind of statement actually is, you know, I was talking about psychological presentation and more philosophical or in epistemological presentation as opposed to ontological presentation. This is psychological and epistemological. It's trying to, you know, cut thought on the topic so that given all that you've studied in the past and so forth, the condition of directly realizing emptiness would be right there for you. Okay?
Where is the source for the psychological, epistemological, or the psychological?
My source for it was a Gelugpa scholar who, after they came out of Tibet, was, His Holiness had a big test amongst all the geishas to compete amongst each other, and he named one of them the best of all of them, and it was he. It was Gendun Lotre, who's walking through walls I use in the my Buddhist meditation course. And he taught it to me in Germany, in Hamburg, in his office at the seminar for the study of whatever, Indian religions or whatever it is. And I don't, Jangya, I saw the other day, has a reference to Shida Donyi Tenlebetsu. So that, and you only bring that up in relation to Ringo Dawa Donyi Tenlebetsu. But that's the only time I've seen it in print. But that means that 2 centuries ago people were talking about it anyway. So it's got to be there somewhere. I don't know where it is.
Was this examination the first of its kind, or was that a traditional?
I think it's the only one that ever took place, as far as I know. And I'm not sure why His Holiness did it. Maybe it was just to, you know, have a big competition or something when you were down, get things going again. Gendun Lotre said that, here's a very minor point. I think it was Shenfu Wangje, what that meant. This is one of the desire realm heavens. And it was just having an etymology for that the Dalai Lama found interesting. It's someone who has control over other person's emanations. Yeah. And so you see, I've kept passing that on. So for us, it's, oh yeah, of course. So you see, you do an emanation, and I've got like control over your emanation to make it work for me. So you see, you have 2 puppet masters, and one's stronger than the other. So it's a higher heaven. So next time, Kozor. And then next time I'll give the assignment in Meditation on Emptiness. I'm sure you don't need any further, you don't need the assignment ahead for next week. So we'll do things, we'll proceed. Just move along like that next time. Famous last words. So what's wrong with, oh yeah, why do you want to exclude the Yamcha Yeshe? Isn't it Rangi Nayula? You see, one rendition of it is Rangi Nawala. And this, I believe some people take that as meaning that it is similar with respect to its own appearance. Consciousness is also. And other people take it as non-yoga. And then Yamcha because it realizes, actually, there are things in can it realize itself? You know, it's supposed to only realize it. But if Yamcha realizes itself, then there's something beyond it. You know, except emptiness, which perceive it. So I'm not giving a good explanation.
Isn't this how they get around certain self-knowers? Because you don't need,
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
you just don't need an infinite impression of them.
But the other one, it's none, you know, does Yamcha Yeshe has Nayul, isn't it?
Sure.
Jugyo,
Yeah.
which is empty.
Right.
As Nayul is the same.
Yeah,
Just as when you perceive blue with your eye consciousness,
Right.
Nayul and Jugyo are the same.
Right.
So, Nayul and Jugyo, when you're directly perceiving emptiness, should be empty.
You could say that the cause of the difference between Paṇ-chen Bsod-nams and non-dual is that the Paṇ-chen Bsod-nams is positive from the viewpoint of serving newly to abandon what you had not been able to abandon previously. And once you've abandoned it, then we're going to call it something else.
Yeah, calling it is one thing, saying it as a second object.
I'm not saying that.